We make choices every single day about who we let into our lives, from the person in the next cubicle to the family moving in down the street. It's a really fundamental part of how we all get along, but how do we actually make those choices? Well, when you start digging into the data, the answers might just surprise you.
Just think about it for a second. You'd probably be perfectly happy to work alongside someone from a totally different background, right? You might even be thrilled to welcome them as a neighbor. But what about welcoming that same person into your family? Does that jump in intimacy? Well, does it change the whole equation?
On the surface, I think we'd all say, of course we do, especially in today's world, in our modern, multicultural societies. We share offices, we share neighborhoods, we live side by side. That's the ideal we're all shooting for.
And that brings us right to the heart of what we're talking about today. When we really look at the hard data, do we find a line, a point where our famous openness starts to, fade a little? And if we do, where exactly is that line drawn? To really get a handle on this, there's one key idea we need to understand.
It's what sociologists call social distance. Now, this isn't about physical space, not at all. It's all about social intimacy. The idea is, the further someone is from our absolute inner circle, the easier it might be to accept them. Let's see how this actually plays out, starting with the outer circles of our lives.
So, let's start with the relationships that are, relatively low stakes, the people we work with and the people who live near us. Let's check out the data and see what patterns pop up when Europeans are asked about having neighbors from different walks of life.
Okay, so what are we looking at here? This table shows the percentage of non-Muslims who'd say no thanks to having a neighbor from one of these groups. Now, if you scan the rows, you'll see the numbers for Jews or atheists or people of a different race. They're pretty low across the board. But then look at that top row for Muslims. The numbers are consistently and noticeably higher in every single country listed.
And sometimes a single number just tells a huge story. Take Austria, for example. More than 1 in 4 people, 28%, said they wouldn't want a Muslim neighbor. That's a really significant level of social distance, even for a relationship that's pretty impersonal, like a neighbor.
And it's not just about who lives next door. This same pattern holds true for the workplace. The research shows that while very few Europeans are flat out opposed to having colleagues from different backgrounds, a Muslim colleague consistently generated, and this is a direct quote, the least positive feelings compared to other groups. So the takeaway is clear. Even in these outer circles, a kind of hierarchy of acceptance starts to emerge.
All right, now let's move inward. Let's see how this pattern builds when things get really personal. We're moving from the neighborhood right into the household, from our colleagues to our actual family. This is where that concept of social distance becomes incredibly powerful.
So how do you even measure this stuff? Well, researchers use this clever tool called a feeling thermometer. Basically, they ask people to rate on a scale of 0 to 10 how comfortable they'd be if their son or daughter had a romantic partner from a different group. Just take a look at these scores for Western Europe.
And when you see it visualized like this, wow, the data becomes crystal clear. A Christian partner scores a super high 9.1. An atheist partner is also way up there at 8.3. But a Muslim partner, the score plummets all the way down to 6.2. You can literally see it right there. The closer the relationship, the bigger the gap in acceptance becomes.
And this isn't even a uniform story across the entire continent. While that comfort level for a child marrying a Muslim is 6.2 in Western Europe, look what happens in Eastern Europe. It drops to just 4.3. This shows a pretty significant geographical divide in attitudes when it comes to this most intimate of relationships. So far, we've only been looking at the attitudes of native Europeans. But of course, relationships are a two-way street, right? So what happens when we flip the lens and ask immigrant groups how they feel about their relatives marrying a native? What the data shows here is really fascinating. This reluctance, it's often mutual. According to one major survey, 24% of natives would find it unpleasant if a close relative married a Muslim. So what about the other side? Well, somewhere between 23 and 29% of Muslims felt the exact same way about a relative marrying a non-Muslim. I mean, those numbers are strikingly similar. Now, a really interesting study in the Netherlands dug even deeper. They asked young people about their interest in partners for both marriage and for casual sex. I know this table looks a little complicated, but just focus on the respondents over on the left and how they rate different partners. You'll notice pretty much everyone prefers their own group for marriage, but the numbers reveal some really interesting things when it comes to more casual relationships.
And here it is, the most surprising finding from that whole study. While native Dutch people saw Turks and Moroccans as pretty much equally unattractive for both marriage and sex, the reverse wasn't true at all.
Moroccan and Turkish men actually rated Dutch women higher as sexual partners than as marriage partners, while rating women from their own group higher for marriage than for sex.
So we have this really complex picture of social distance and reciprocal feelings and different desires depending on what kind of relationship we're talking about. But there's one more layer to peel back here, the gap between what we think other people believe and what we actually believe ourselves.
Okay, this is where that gap between perception and reality just blows up. In the UK, a whopping 70% of people believe that most people would mind if a relative married a Muslim. But then, when you ask about their own feelings, would you mind? Only 33% said they would personally mind. That's a massive difference, and we see this exact same pattern in every single country they surveyed.
So let's pull all this together. What have we really learned? First, social distance is a real thing. Our acceptance of other people often goes down as a relationship gets more intimate. Second, there's a consistent pattern across Europe where unions with Muslims face the most reluctance. Third, and this is crucial, it's not a one-way street. That reluctance is often mutual. And finally, and maybe most surprisingly, we consistently think other people are way more intolerant than we are ourselves.
And that leaves us with one final, pretty provocative question to chew on. This huge gap between how we see society and how we see ourselves, it's significant. What does it say about us, about our communities, and about the public conversations we're having that we so often assume the worst in others?